Good morning, Eddie G's Music World for the most probably the last broadcast of 2018. It is December 17th, 2018 currently. I do usually one a week, and for the next 2 to 3 weeks, there's going to be little kids running around, screaming and yelling and interrupting. And I think it's best I just take a little bit of a break. But who knows? There could be something that inspires me to do another Eddie G's Music World in 2018. But for now, we'll just assume it's the last one for the year. And we're going to do a couple of things. I did a little checking up on the kind of famous birthdays type of things that happen in music, a little mix of both for today's date. And then we'll get back into the routine of the top 500 albums as well. We'll start going through those. We haven't finished them. And this is going to be the beginning. We'll start off with a couple of things that happened that I just noticed. In 2010, Captain Beefheart died. He was 69 years old. His real name is Don Glenn Vliet. And Captain Beefheart was one of these wacky type of approaches to music, kind of like Frank Zappa, but less popular. In about 1977, a friend of mine had this very eclectic, kind of offbeat type of music collection where he had like stuff like Blondie before they were popular. He had the MC5. He had other bands. So one of the bands he had also Captain Beefheart. He had Generation X before Billy Idol went solo. So he had a bit of a offbeat record collection, and he lent me this Captain Beefheart albums, a couple of them, and it was nothing I'd ever heard before. So for that, it was kind of unique that I was being exposed to music that was not that mainstream. And I don't remember thinking it was the best music around, but I listened to it anyway, and I was amazed by its difference to all the current pop that was out at the time. Also, early 60s, 1962 or 3, there was a guy named Chas Newby. He replaced Stu Sutcliffe, who died, and on bass, because Stu Sutcliffe was one of the early Beatles. Maybe the name wasn't the Beatles, but it was basically John, Paul, George, and Ringo, but Stu was in there too. Anyway, for about 2 weeks, this guy Chas Newby replaced him, and then on the bass. And then at some point, they had to make a decision. This guy Chas Newby left, and Paul McCartney obviously became the permanent bass player. So that's the two remarkable things that happened that I looked up. There were more, but I didn't want to make the show only about special things that happen on this day in history, because that's pretty routine, and didn't want to become that predictable. So now I'm going to switch to people who had birthdays today, famous people. There was a guy, Tommy Steele, in 1936 was his birthday. Kind of one of these British acts that never really transformed into this big American singing act. He had one or two, "Singing the Blues," I think, was one of his songs. But anyway, he was big in England, but not never really made it huge in the American market. I didn't write down if they're still alive or not. I don't think anybody's that interested in that. It just happens to be his birthday. Then there was one of the Neville brothers, Art Neville. He wasn't the one that had all those solo hits. Aaron Neville, Tell It Like It Is. This is Art, his brother, and he and the Neville brothers were kind of a New Orleans, Louisiana type act that caught on for a while and had a following in the 70s and 80s. So he was born in 1937. Next is a guy I've heard of, a member of the Four Tops, Eddie Kendricks, born in 1939. He had one solo hit called Boogie Down, which is pretty big. I think one other one as well. And of course, he was one of the original singers of the Four Tops. If not original, he was certainly an early singer. I'm pretty sure he was original, actually. So he was born in 1939 on December 17th. Next on the list of birthdays, Paul Butterfield. Paul Butterfield. I've heard of this guy. Blues act, Paul Butterfield Blues Band. I think there was somebody famous from Elvin Bishop knew, they were kind of all in the same circles. And he had this blues act, and a lot of people copied his style, and he was big for a while, but like most of these bluesy type stuff, they're not mainstream acts. Next on the birthday list, I'm doing it by year. So I remember buying a book of British hits. It was just listing the hits on the charts. And one of them was Dave D, Dozy, Becky, and Mick Titch. And these were like guys who had hits in England. One of the Dave D guy was one of the members of the band, and can't remember what their hits were, but it's really insignificant to anybody outside of the UK, because that act that I named, Dave D, Dozy, Becky, Mick Titch, never made it over here. So, but this guy was part of it, and his birthday was 1943. December 17th. You're listening to Eddie G's Music World, going over a couple of things from history. Next on the list, 1947, was this guy, Jim Hodder. Now, obviously, he's one of these session guys, so he didn't have his own success on his own, but a couple of notable songs that he played on was he was a drummer, and he drummed in Really in the Years, and You're No Good by first of all, Really in the Years was by Steely Dan, and he was also did the drumming on You're No Good for Linda Ronstadt. But the thing with Steely Dan is, why wouldn't he have been part of the? I guess they just rotated session guys, and that's why they didn't have him as part of Steely Dan. Because if you're a member of Steely Dan and you drum on one of the songs, you don't get special mention for drumming on that hit. You're just the guy in Steely Dan. But my guess is the two guys in Steely Dan, Fagen and Becker, Walter Becker, Donald Fagen, probably just had different people coming in. And Ronstadt used session musicians. It was pretty well known. Maybe at some point there was a Linda Ronstadt band, but a lot of times these bands are not the ones in the studio. It's studio session work. So Jim Hodder was the guy who played on those two songs. I'm sure many more, because the guy couldn't have made a living just playing on two songs. Next is a very big rock star, but again, on his own, you don't really, unless you're really into music, you're not going to really recognize the name. But if you're into music, you would. Paul Rodgers, born in 1949 on this date. I remember being about 10 years old, and there was this band called Free, and they had the song All Right Now. And Paul Rodgers sang on that. So that's one band he was in that was popular. The biggest band, of course, was Bad Company, part of the Swan Song label, which is Led Zeppelin's music label that they ran. He was the biggest in that, because Bad Company had quite a few popular songs and had a good 4 or 5 years of popularity. At some point, the people passed away and left the band. I doubt they lasted more than 5-10 years, is my guess. What else? When Queen reformed after Freddie Mercury died, I think he was the first. He was in the first incarnation of the new lead singing of Queen, meaning he was the first guy to replace Freddie Mercury. Second guy is obviously Adam Lambert, who's doing the vocals now. But Queen had an album out, and they even came to Montreal, where I live, and toured with Paul Rodgers. I'm pretty close. I pretty much believe that. It's a vivid memory that I know he was in Queen and they had an album out, but whether or not they came with him to tour here, it's probably true. He was also had a song called Radioactive. He was in the singer of the band The Firm, and that was made up of like rock stars in other bands. I think Jimmy Page was in that band, and after that, maybe one of the Queen guys. The Firm, could Roger Taylor have been in that band? Not going to say that it's true because I really don't know that part. The Firm is a band that had only one or two songs that were popular. But for sure, Paul Rogers was in it. So it's worth mentioning. 1950, Carlton Barrett. He was in the band called the Wailers, which was Bob Marley's band. I don't know what instrument he played, or maybe he just sang. I didn't go deeply into his catalog of history and all that. So let's just say he was in the band and leave it at that. Here's a band called The Emotions. Best of My Love, not the Eagles one, but another more upbeat dance version. One of the singers in that band, The Emotions, was Wanda Hutchison. She was born in 1951, so she's alive. She's in her late 60s. And The Emotions did have a couple other hits, a few other hits, but The Best of My Love, if you look it up, you will hear that song. And like I said, Wanda Hutchison is, I'm sure, one of the singers, because these type of vocal bands, they didn't play, in most cases, they didn't play their own instruments. Here's a guy I saw live, Mike Mills, the bass player for REM, born in 1958. So today, could he be 60 today? Yeah, looks like he is. Yeah, December 17th, 1958. So he'd be 60 years old today. And of course, REM was, I think he might have been, there's this guy Barry and this guy Mike Mills. One of them left early and was replaced. Might have been Mike Mills, might have been this guy Barry. And either way, I know REM was lucky enough to sign a massive deal in the late 90s when their popularity was waning and the internet was not, people were stealing songs left and right. So he might have been part of that massive deal where he piled up a bunch of money and the record started to tank after that. So good move by him and his manager if he was getting part of that money. Next is a band where the lead singer or member, at least, I'm not sure what instrument he played or what he did in the band, Bob Stinson. He was in a band called The Replacements that never really, you heard them on a soundtrack or two. Very little airplay. Didn't really catch on. They were like alternative, poppy kind of thing, but never, I guess they were famous for not being famous to me. Because everybody raved about them. I'd seen reviews about the band and lots of critical acclaim, but when it came to record sales, you always saw them in the lower section of the charts. So, like I said many times before, it's not a reflection on how good or bad they were. It's just the fact that they never played. We're going to the 60s, 1962, and there's someone in a band that had about 4 or 5 hits. One of the singers, I'm going to guess, Sarah Dallin of Bananarama, whose biggest hit was Venus, but I think that was a remake of Talking Blue. Then they had a song with Robert De Niro and a good 3 or 4 other songs that were well known. I don't think she was the one that married, as one of the girls in Bananarama married Andrew Ridgeley, but I don't know if this is one of the girls. Doesn't really matter. But she is, she's 2 years younger than me, so she's probably has to be somewhere around 56. Next on the list of the birthdays, rock and roll or pop music birthdays, is a band called Supergrass. One of these 1 or 2 hit guys. I think they had a song that I see on commercial. We are young. We are this, whatever. I don't remember how it goes exactly. It wasn't. I'm pretty sure that's Supergrass. And this guy, Mickey Quinn, was in that band. So he, 1969, he's almost 50 years old, 49 years old. Supergrass was the band. And happy birthday to you, Mickey Quinn. Off to the next year, 1970, Sugar Ray, a band that, a big deal was made of all of the band for 3 or 4 years. The singer ended up doing a lot of music trivia contests, like he named that tune, and lip syncing stuff, like Mark McGrath. That's who it is. So he managed to survive the Sugar Ray phase, you know, when they were big, and they, you know, this guy DJ Homicide was part of the group, but the guy from Sugar Ray, the lead singer Mark McGrath, definitely had a managed to keep his name out there and do pretty well, and lasted longer than the band Sugar Ray. Another band that seems to sustain its popularity, you know, they haven't had a big hit in about 4 or 5 years. One Republic, and they can come to an arena and still sell a lot of tickets, and they're still popular, but they seem to have slipped a little bit in popularity, but not a lot. So they're still like kind of popular. And the guy's name is Eddie Fisher, obviously not the guy same as the guy who was married to Elizabeth Taylor and Debbie Reynolds, who was a crooner in the 50s or 40s. This is different, of course. Maybe it's his son. I don't think so. It just happens to have the same name as the other Eddie Fisher. Here's a band, 1978. This guy from this band, 3 Days Grace. I don't think I can name you one 3 Days Grace song. I remember being curious about them because I saw and I heard stuff about them, and I looked them up, and I didn't recognize any of their music. But the band I know. So Neil Christopher was the guy from that, and another. This next band, Paramore. The guitarist from that band is Taylor York. 1989, he was born, so he's about to turn 40 if my math is right. 99, 2000, 30? Yeah, I guess 30. 1999, 2001. Yeah, he's about to turn 30. And Paramore is really big. I remember around 2010 or 12, kind of like One Republic. They had 2 or 3 big songs. Still see, you know, I hear their name. Like there was some, I stumbled on their name somehow on the computer and YouTube, whatever, and saw they had some new songs out, and they still could draw a little bit of popularity. So they're still around, I'm assuming. There was a girl singer in Paramore, but this is Taylor York's birthday. That's what this discussion is about. For the famous birthdays for 2018, December 17th on Eddie G's Music World. So we're going to the top 500 albums right now. Switching gears to the top 500 albums according to Rolling Stones. Last I stopped, it was 351, so we're up to 350. The Yardbirds, Roger the Engineer. Now it says that Over, Under, Sideways, Down was on this song, was on this album, but Jeff Beck was in this incarnation of the Yardbirds. People came in and out of that band. Like Clapton was there for the first album, gone, then he left. Page was there. A couple of different singers whose names escape me. Keith Ralph, I think. One was electrocuted. One killed himself, or maybe he didn't kill himself, but definitely somebody. Keith Ralph was the singer, and he was electrocuted. And of course, after that, a couple albums later, they obviously became Led Zeppelin, 2 or 3 members, because obviously Jeff Beck was around for that later period, and Jimmy Page was really around for the last section of the Yardbirds, and they were going to call themselves the New Yardbirds, but then they became Led Zeppelin. People left, and of course Plant, Bonham. I know Bonham and Plant came from Band of Joy. Jimmy Page came from the Yardbirds. John Paul Jones, he was definitely a well-known session guy, just like Page was. And whether or not, I don't think he was ever in the Yardbirds, John Paul Jones. Could be worth looking into. Anyway, that's number 350. Next on the list, we're going to number 349, Jay-Z, The Black Album. I think people are saying that this is his big, huge, brilliant album that everybody raved about. But I know there's a song where he uses "It's a Hard Luck Life," the Annie song there. Could this be on there? I don't know, but I know 99 Problems and a Bitch Ain't One is on the album, and that got a lot of airplay. And of course, he's huge on his own. He's married to Beyonce. He manages Rihanna. So just those 3. You don't have to worry about this guy. He owns, maybe, does he own 1% or a quarter of a percent or something small of the Brooklyn basketball team, the Brooklyn Nets? I remember hearing that he bought into that basketball team. Number 348, Muddy Waters at Newport, 1960. Very bluesy act, well known for that. They say on this album is a hoochie coochie man. Got my mojo working. The harp was played by James Cotton, but I'm not going to try to fool you. I don't know much about the blues from Chicago, and I'm not going to claim to know it. I'm not going to go into great detail about something I don't know that well. Let's see what's next. 347 on the top 500 album chart. Pink Floyd, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Funny, the last show I talked about this because Nick Mason is touring and he's playing songs from the early years, which this is one of the albums, Piper of the Gates of Dawn. I am pretty sure he's playing some of that. And I don't want to repeat last show's talk, which was that potentially Waters or Gilmour could show up, but I wouldn't hold my breath. I have listened to some of this early stuff. Syd Barrett was in the band at this time of this album. Did not get major airplay in North America, so it's nothing that's stuck in my mind, but it was nice, nicely done. And for sure, it's not the only Pink Floyd album that's going to be on this chart. You can be sure of that. Number 346, De La Soul, 3 Feet High and Rising. I remember buying this tape in 1989. They had a good, Me, Myself, and I was on this. And this is the band that famously lost money while having a massive hit. Because Me, Myself, and I was illegally was found to be borrowing from the Turtles song, You Showed Me. The Turtles had a hit record called You Showed Me. And they went to court and said, well, you have a song, Me, Myself, and I, or one other song that was on the album that used the little sample of You Showed Me and didn't pay, didn't get acceptance, didn't agree and the money. So they sued them into oblivion and they didn't make money. And I think they ended up losing money on the album. Because once you get sued for damages and extra money and all that, it could get expensive, which it did for De La Soul. I know De La Soul is still around because they came to Montreal about 10 years ago, and I almost went to see them, but it was one of those lazy nights where I said, well, I could go out, and it's my, cold winter night. I stayed home. Next is a band I kind of saw, the Talking Heads, Stop Making Sense. Well, I saw some of the members. Well, this one's at number 345. I saw this girl, Napolitano, who used to be in, she was the singer of Concrete Blonde, and she took the place of David Byrne. And of course, the Chris Frantz was in this version of Talking Heads, and Tina Weymouth. They were called the Heads because, of course, most probably the Talking Heads name was owned by David Byrne. And they probably figured, why bother saying Talking Heads? It'll cost us most of the profits. So they used the name Heads. It's just a guess, but logically, doesn't it make sense? If it's going to cost you, if you're only making, they were playing a small club, Cafe Campus. So for the couple of thousand they made that night, I don't think they wanted to give 1,000 of it away to David Byrne. So they just dropped one of the names of Talking Heads off. It was a decent show. It was nothing special. I mean, there was no amazing thing to hear the singer from Concrete Blonde singing Talking Head songs. But this album in its own had Take Me to the River, which was pretty popular, Psycho Killer, and kind of considered art funk. And the Talking Heads went on to have quite a bit of success. Number 344, Lou Reed, Berlin. Same kind of scene because I think Talking Heads were from the New York scene, and so is Lou Reed. This album is called Berlin, 1973. and produced by Bob Ezrin. Again, Lou Reed's another one of these guys from Velvet Underground, famous for not being famous, falls under this guy because he did have success, but underground success. He never was a headliner of a big arena or anything like that. But played guitar, he sang, he wrote songs. So, despite the fact that he never, other than Walk on a Wild Side, did not sit there in the top 40 superstar, he didn't turn into David Bowie. And he did pass away in 2014, I believe. I heard that he came with his wife, Anderson, I think it was something Anderson, and they did some bizarre, offbeat, weirdo type of show during the Jazz Fest, and apparently a good portion of the people that paid to go see the show walked out during the show because he's a bit of an offbeat character. He probably played some weird squeaky songs, and nobody really was into it, and maybe they got their money back, maybe they didn't. Next is a tie into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, number 343, Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell. I say tied into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because the producer of this album was Todd Rundgren, who was in the group of people that could have been nominated to be entered in the Hall of Fame this year. He has been quoted as saying, I would not join the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame if voted for. But, I mean, he's a famous producer. He's had a couple of songs of his own. He did a song that became a hit for England, Dan and John Ford Coley. Love One Another. Forget the name of it. I think that's it. But he had his solo hits a bit. Of course, Hello, It's Me, I Saw the Light, and other ones. I Want to Bang on the Drum All Day. But producing-wise, look, he produced Bat Out of Hell by Meatloaf. I mean, just that in itself, that's a 14, 15 million seller album around the world. So he was worthy of being nominated, meaning amongst the group that could be entered in. But he did not get the nod to go in. And it could have been that he said all those negative things about the Hall of Fame, that he said he wouldn't show up if it was actually put in. So Depeche Mode, they were recently nominated. I'm not sure if it was this year or the one before. But they haven't been in. Number 342, Violator. World in My Eyes was on there. Halo. Sweetest Perfection. Personal Jesus. These are all songs from that album. Very synth-oriented. A band that is synthesizer, kind of offbeat type of, not offbeat because Depeche Mode was not that offbeat, but a band that kind of could be put in the same area as Depeche Mode. The Cure got into the Hall of Fame. They're being inducted in April. Now, not to say Depeche Mode and the Cure are similar, because they really aren't, but they're both called kind of alternative music from the same era, maybe a little bit around the same time, early 80s to 90s. Both still around. Both achieved a lot of success. And Depeche Mode should get in one day. I did see them live and was pretty impressed. Number 341 on the top 500 of all-time albums, according to Rolling Stones, on NEG's Music World. Last episode of 2018 is my guess. Doubt if I'll be back for this year. I need a bit of a break. And, of course, my kids will be around a lot, so it'll make it hard to do a show. Let's see, number 341. Seems to be a lot of mainstream artists in the last 2 or 3. So let's guess U2. Moby, same era, the 90s. Play. Moby had a few moody type of songs, kind of like ethereal synthesizer, voice layers, dancey type of songs. Porcelain, Natural Blues, 2 songs that he's known for. It's kind of a artsy type of guy, has succeeded. Who was it that he get? He had a bit of a feud with Eminem, because I guess Eminem considered him a little too artsy for his taste. But Moby still comes out with records, but he's not on the tip of people's tongue when they're going out to buy download a new album. They're not looking for Moby most of the time, but anyway, he's done well over the years. So he's number 341, and the album was called Play. And apparently, the song Play was used. Music from that was used in a lot of commercials. Number 340. It's been a while since the Rolling Stones came up. Let's guess. The Rolling Stones. Black Flag. No, wouldn't have guessed them. Kind of a punky band, if I'm correct. LA hardcore punk, yeah. Damage is the album. MCA Records didn't want to release it because it was one of these off the wall, freaky, punky stuff, and they didn't want to be behind that kind of stuff. Henry Rollins, this kind of beat poet, rebel guy, was in this band. So, Rollins is another one famous, but not mainstream famous. And this band, I barely know their music at all. Number 339, let's just see what it is. Tom Waits, same kind of, now they're getting back. See, it's funny. They went from, mainstream Max, Depeche Mode, Meatloaf, Talking Heads, kind of mainstream. Now all of a sudden they're switching to this guy, Tom Waits, the heart of Saturday Night, who's known for not being popular with the mainstream, for sure. Been around a long time. This album is from 1974. Not a guy I know that much about, except the fact that for sure he had that song In the Neighborhood, and of course Downtown Train was a cover of Rod Stewart cover of Tom Waits. Big Brother and the Holding Company at number 338. Cheap Thrills, of course, Janis Joplin. I think I remember there was some guy playing in a small bar like 25, 30 years ago. I remember the sign, like the little poster, once member of Big Brother and the Holding Company. So some guy was in this band, ended up coming to do little bars in Montreal. So from what I can, just from that alone, you can imagine how, I'm assuming it means he's probably not a huge deal if you're playing a little bar, but he must have played in the band at some point. These bands, a lot of them had people pass in and out for sessions. So technically, the guy could say he played guitar in one or two songs and he was part of the band in his mind. I forget the guy's name, and it's a name I've heard before, but now I can't remember what the name of this guy was that was in this band. But Piece of My Heart was on this, and she was one of the 27-year-old club where the rock stars had died at 27. Number 337, a band not yet in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but as has been said many times, and I agree, doesn't matter if you're in there or not, doesn't validate you as being great or just average or below average. That's all subjective. It shows that the people that vote you in, they just don't think these guys, Jethro Tull, are worth it, and I think they are. And this album was Aqualung, which the song, people think it's pro-pedophile, but I read something that the band kind of meant it to put down pedophiles. But of course, if you listen to the words, it's all about pedophilia. A guy, it's a story about a guy looking at girls, and young underage girls. More details than that, I'm not going to go into the whole story behind the song, but it was a music staple, classic song on there. Other ones too. Tull had probably a good 10, 15 songs that are considered worthy of making them the stars that they were. I did see Jethro Tull, but they rearranged a few songs about 10 years ago, and it wasn't a show that I was overly blown away with. And I think right now it's Ian Anderson has broken away from the guitarist. Forget his name. I just learned his name and now I forgot it. Okay. Anyway, it'll come to me. So this placing was number 337. the album Aqualung. 336, Radiohead in Rainbow. So here we have a band that is inducted this year, Radiohead. They're one of the bands like a Nirvana type of thing. They were always avant-garde. They were always different. They were always trying not to be the cool band like the Bon Jovi type band. They were always different. But they managed to become huge anyway, even though they never were this poppy bubblegums type of band. They sell out, arenas sometimes, and they do outdoor festivals, and people go to see them, 30,000 people at a time. So they put them in the Hall of Fame. They're going to be inducted in April. I'm curious to see who's going to induct them. I'm going to guess someone from that era. But they're still popular. They still come up with records. I'm sure I remember this. They actually had an album available on their website about 8 years ago or so. And the on the website it says, pay what you'd like to pay. And you can have it. And I think people were reasonable about it. They gave them $5 to $10 per album. They weren't like saying here's 25 cents. So they got a decent amount. Don't forget, if it's downloaded, it's probably cheaper to sell that way than it is to start making records and stick them in record stores and distribute it. So these guys, they managed to do quite well with that format for that album. Don't know how much, I don't know if they did that again or not, but they definitely did it with one of their albums. This could be the album, I don't know. Oh, this is the album. This is Pay What You Like release. So this is the album that they were known for, to say pay what you'd like to play. Pay what you'd like to pay, sorry. But it got a lot of good reviews. So I hope people that didn't pay a lot are happy with what they got. Number 335 of Eddie G's Music World. And it's Soundgarden, Super Unknown. Okay, here's this band. Sold 20 or 30 million records. Black Hole Sun. Spoon Man was good. And, we know that the lead singer, Chris Cornell, took his own life about 2-3 years ago. Then later on, a few years later, or months, I don't know how much time, the guy from Linkin Park, Chester Bennington, I think that's his name, he killed himself, and they were friends. That's what's really bizarre. So you think you've figured it out, but listen, these guys who seem to have achieved a great amount of success in their lives killed themselves. So not quite sure what the story was with Chris Cornell, but they had a reasonable amount of success, and I heard them talked about it on a talk show that maybe they'll get into the Hall of Fame, but their eligibility is probably about now, like maybe next year, because you have to be around for 25 years. And by the mid 1994, this album Super Unknown came out. So just based on the math, 25 years from that is not 2019, and they might have had an album out before Super Unknown. I don't really know. From the Seattle scene, kind of the Nirvana style type of band, same era, same style. Nah, not the same style. It's unfair. Okay, number 334 on the top 500. Seems to be getting very 90s lately, so let's see. Let's go back to one of these blues guys. B.B. King, let's guess. Graham Parker, okay, 70s kind of guy. I did see Graham Parker live, opened up for Cheap Trick. And Squeezing Out Sparks, that was the album had just come out, actually. And he had a song called Local Girls, and there were other good songs off this album. I remember being very impressed with him live. Elvis Costello style, the thing, never had that massive song. Never was a mainstream poster boy type of guy. I heard he lived in upstate New York, and he settled into that kind of quieter lifestyle. Now I don't know if he's touring anymore, but maybe if he put in 30 years of albums and concerts and stuff, maybe he managed to save a couple $1 million, and he's okay now. I don't know. I don't know how he's retired, or maybe I'm wrong and he's still working. I don't know. But this album, Squeezing Out Sparks, definitely was power pop at its best. I remember being very impressed with them live when I did see him that one time. Number 333. Who could that be next? X. I wouldn't have guessed that. Wild Gift. John Doe, another band famous for not being famous. I say it again. People who are in the know about music will say they love this band, but the truth is they didn't sell a lot of records. So couldn't have been that many people that were that blown away by these people, because if they were, why did they go buy the albums? Because they definitely didn't sell a lot. They were considered the White Stripes of their day, which makes me sad because I passed up free concert of Jack White about 2 months ago out of pure laziness. That was the only thing. If I wanted to get in my car and drive for an hour and take a metro for 45 minutes, I could have gone to the show for free. But I didn't go. I was just sort of lazing around. Anyway, X, I think I've heard them once, maybe, in my life. Um, they were punkish, and I can't add a lot more to it. Not a lot I can say about X. They never got played here where I live, so I would have had to go seek them out, and I don't remember seeking them out to any great extent. Number 332 of the top 500 albums, according to Rolling Stone, is Richard and Linda Thompson, Shoot Out the Lights, number 332. He was in a couple of bands, this guy. Oh, what was the name of these groups? Never caught on in the United States. Part of the British folk scene, and it was a duo. I think it was his wife, Richard and Linda Thompson. But he was in a band in the 60s too. And now, excuse me, that I'm trying to remember the name of the band, it's slipping my mind. Starts with a P. That narrows it down. They had a song on this album, Wall of Death and Walking on a Wire, but they divorced. And he has come to Montreal, touring on his own, playing small clubs, because he has a following. Probably everywhere he goes, he's got 200-300 fans, this guy. So out of the 300-400, let's say 400 fans, out of the 400 fans, if 150 of them go out to see him, he's going to make his money for that show. Sorry for my throat being a little hoarse today. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's just been a long week and it's only Monday, but somehow it's a long week, and screaming has cost me my voice. But there's not a lot more time left in the show. I will get through it. I'm a trooper. Not a Starship Trooper, just a trooper. Number 331. Of course, the Beatles have to show up all over this list, I'm sure. Help was the album. I know it was a shared credit type of thing where Paul and John, who did most of the writing, put each other's names on the writing credits. But I had heard that it was mostly a John Lennon song, maybe kind of reflecting the song Help I'm talking about. Of course, the album Help had more than one song. There was You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, Ticket to Ride, I've Just Seen a Face, the song Help. As I said, kind of leaning towards some, like this album was leaning a little bit more experimental than the pure bubblegummy first album or two. It was a little bit more adventurous, where You've Got to Hide Your Love Away is not your typical top 40 song. Ticket to Ride is also a little different. So they were growing as a band in 1965, and of course entering into more experimental albums like Rubber Soul, of course. Number 330 on this list is Neil Young with the album Tonight's the Night from 1975. And a tribute to some friends that died, this album was. The guitarist Danny Whitten from Crazy Horse, and a roadie, Bruce Berry. Tired Eyes was on this, Speaking Out. So I don't know this album that well. I know Neil Young, he did lose one of his houses. I'm assuming he has more than one, but he lost a house, maybe the only one, to the fires that were just raging through California in the last 2 months. He's remarried to Daryl Hannah. I know he's had one or two wives before that. And let's see what else we can see on the next item for The Price is Right. Oh, that's a TV show. And the next album on the top 500. 329 it would be. James Brown and the Jungle Groove. There's a bunch of his singles from late 1969 to 1970. Funky Drummer was one, Give It Up or Turn It Loose. Good for James Brown, who ended up making millions of dollars later in his life due to a lawsuit that he had against a record company, where they were not compensating him fairly for the writing that he did. So he got compensated for that and lived a decently long life. Had a few run-ins with the police, car chase, I think, where he drove, his tires got worn out, and the cops eventually got him. And, passed away about 15 years ago now. Wow. He was coming to Montreal, and he had to cancel the show because, well, he had a very good reason. He died. And I thought of going to see him, but I never was that seriously going to go. He was a legend, so kind of would have been worth it to see. I saw a movie about 5 years ago where there are people going to a ski lodge and they're drinking like hot cocoa, these people, and the band playing is James Brown, his band. It was kind of looked a little out of place, a bunch of ski bunnies and James Brown. I don't know. Number 328, let's get to that on the chart. Sonic Youth, Daydream Nation. Kind of like the band that, again, you know the band's name if you're into music. They got a following, but not a huge band. They had an album called Goo once, I think. But this album, trying to see if there's a song that stood out. Well, none of their songs got mainstream airplay. So none of this stood out. None of it was played a lot. Maybe in pockets in certain areas of the United States they did play it, but overall, they didn't have music that went near the mainstream. 327, let's see what it will be. Liz Phair. Oh, I got her autograph. Yeah, I went to see Liz Phair about 23 years ago in a Club Soda. And towards the end of her show, you know, anybody put things in front of her, she signed, and I put my ticket stub in front of her. And she was in some kind of 2000, like a poppy, bubblegummy movie. Her song, Why Can't I, or Why Can't We? And very, very like poppy, bubblegummy type of song. That was the only real crossover hit she had. It was kind of like lightweight pop, decent voice. She's coming back to Montreal. Couldn't believe it. I was looking at upcoming shows and I see Liz Phair. I mean, how many people can go to this show? When I saw her, she was a bit popular, at least at the time. Now she's like not whatever whatever amount of popularity she had 25 years ago, probably down to like 30% of that. So let's say there were 300 people that were there 25 years ago. There's probably 100 people that are there today if I go to their concert, which I wouldn't do because I barely know her music. I barely remember the concert. She was kind of like a bit of an Avril Lavigne type, but a little bit older than Avril when she made it. But Liz Phair didn't really make it big anyway. I don't even remember the concert. Here, what's going on? I'm counting down these albums, and 3 of them have been nominated for, they're going into the Hall of Fame, The Cure, and I forget what the other 1 or 2 was that are going in the Hall of Fame that were on this list as well. This is Disintegration, 1989. Fascination Street was on this. Very good album. So we'll be seeing The Cure being inducted. Let's see if I can remember who was the other inductee that Radiohead. Yeah, that's the other one that's being inducted, and they're on this section of my list. And was there a third one? Trying to remember. I don't think Depeche Mode was nominated. Meatloaf, Rundgren was kind of had a chance, but he's not going in this year. So I think that was all of the people. There's two of them. People getting inducted are on the small section of 30 or 40 bands read off today going into the Hall of Fame at the same time. That's a bit of a coincidence. There's not much time left, so I doubt if I'll hear another one, but you never know. So The Cure's still around. Robert Smith has that avant-garde, crazy, freaky hair thing going for him. And look, getting in the Hall of Fame. It's impressive. Number 325, Eric Clapton Slowhand. Well, he's probably already in the Hall of Fame. So I'm pretty sure he is. Slowhand was the nickname that he got. The Yardbirds manager gave him that name. On this album was from the 1977 was the song Cocaine, Wonderful Tonight. And he had that big solo career, and this was like when he was in the midst of it. Maybe not off this album, but I Shot the Sheriff came out about a year or two before that. And of course, Clapton, not a lot I can say that you don't know how big an act he is and influential, and all the other accolades thrown in the direction of Eric Clapton. I'm sure this next guy's in the Hall of Fame, David Bowie, with his album Station to Station at number 324. Came out in 1976, yeah. Kind of a bit dancey. Station to Station was a bit of an offbeat type of song. Golden Years. TVC 15 was also well known, like an R&B style. Golden Years was great too, like I just said. And we did lose David Bowie December, I'm going to say 2015. I could be wrong, but that seems to be my memory. That I woke up one Christmas week, and around Christmas time anyway, and he was dead. So we'll probably due for another huge rock act to die in December this year. The Police, Ghost in the Machine from 1981. Was this their third album? I think it was. And this is one of the most overplayed songs I've ever heard. Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic. I think it was recorded in Morin Heights in Quebec. And they had a good song called Invisible Sun as well. Famous for kind of imploding within 5 years, the Police were, only to reform for a reunion tour in 2009. And of course, Sting had this massive career as well. People covering songs that he did as well. Ghost in the Machine. I'm pretty sure I went out and bought that album when it came out. Back in the day when you had to go to record stores to find the albums. Okay. 322. Randy Newman, Sail Away. Okay, it's the second Randy Newman album on this list. And this is early on in his career, 1972. Like, other than the soundtracks and short people, there's not a lot I can say about this guy, because I'd be basically repeating my review of, or my discussion of the last Randy Newman album earlier on in the chart from last week. But he got a lot of critical acclaim, so thus he's in a pretty good position on this chart. 321, Nick Drake. His band was called the Bad Seeds, but you know what, people? Pretty much as far as I can go with the guy. They didn't play him ever here on the radio here. This album's called Pink Moon from 1972. Well, there is a guy named Drake who's not related to Nick Drake. He's pretty big deal. I can tell you a bit about him, but Nick Drake, I have to just plead ignorance when it comes to that guy, because he's managed to have a long career, but not an illustrious career, and not a well-known act. But he's known. I'm sure he's not doing too bad. Here's Radiohead again. Number 320. Amnesiac is the album. Kid A was a song from this. Again, his squealy vocals is what he's famous for. Moody words, very like. But look, every year this guy's going to come to do festivals, this band. And every year that he does the festivals, he sells out concerts all over the world. So something about this band that people adore. I like them kind of. There's about 4 or 5 songs that I would say I like. But I don't know if they're on this album or not. And this album is from 2001. Number 319. Let's see, we've heard about a lot of alternative classic rock. Time for a blues guy. Who could it be? Muddy Waters, let's guess. The Wailers, Burnin'. Funny, I talked about one of the Wailers having a birthday. Let's see this. If I wonder if he's in this version of the Wailers, because a lot of times these guys, the members change. I don't remember what the guy's name was exactly, but the list. This is the last Wailers albums with Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer. I know that. They were a big part of this is the original version of I Shot the Sheriff is on this album. And of course covered by Eric Clapton. We all know that. So he was one of these Jamaican acts that crossed over into the United States as being a very popular band outside of Jamaica as well. Now we're into the last album from my list of the top 500 albums for the Rolling Stones magazine's list. Backstabbers, good song. I remember it very, very well. And they had other hits too. The OJs, For the Love of Money was one of them, which was used by The Apprentice TV show, the opening music. And the Backstabbers was like, I remember the lyrics, they smile in your face all the time, they want to take your place. The Backstabbers. Classic song from those years in 1972. So that's it. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, even though it just ended, and Happy New Year from Eddie G's Music World. If I don't speak to you on this channel, have a great one. And if I do decide to come back before the second week of January, I will. And I will have more to talk about with you. So for now, we will just say goodbye. Thank you for listening. Thanks to the Grigster and Creeper Freak for being part of shows that I did. And it's much appreciated. And I'm happy to be back when we'll do another collaboration. And thanks again, Eddie G's Music World, for December 17th, 2018. Signing off.